Isabella Rodriguez was born in 1975 in Colombia. Her parents Eduardo and Elizabeth Rodriguez wanted a better life for her and her sister. In the 1990s, they moved to Florida, where they eventually obtained residency. They had a really happy life in a sunny town where Isabella and her sister Adriana thrived. Isabella obtained U.S. citizenship when she was 27 years old and married William Hellman. The couple eventually divorced after 10 years together, but they remained on good terms. Isabella wasn't the type to hold a grudge. In fact, the girl never even spoke ill of others. She was kind, and all she wanted was to live a long and happy life. In 2015, it seemed that all her dreams had come true. She met a man named Louis Bennett online and they began a relationship. It was known about the man that he had once been a sailor, and at the time of their acquaintance he owned a solar panel company. Louis moved with his family to Australia from the UK at a young age, earned money and bought a catamaran. On this ship he later took Isabella on a trip. They visited Tahiti and Singapore together. The relationship between Isabella and Louis grew quickly, and by July 2016, they had a daughter whom they named Amelia. 6 months after the birth of their child, the couple purchased a condo in a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. On April 30, 2017, after Isabella and Louis left their 9-month-old daughter with relatives, they traveled to St. Martin, a small Caribbean island where they planned to go as a wedding trip. It was the trip of a lifetime for them, and they set out on the catamaran Louis. For the next 2 weeks they sailed through the British Virgin Islands and then along the coast of Puerto Rico before heading to Cuba. It was here that they spent most of their vacation. From the outside it looked like they were a happy couple in love, traveling on a catamaran they called Surf into Summer. They felt it was the happiest summer of their lives, and after 2 weeks at sea, the couple headed home. At about 5:30 p.m. on May 14th, the catamaran set sail from the Cuban resorts. 3 hours later, Isabella called her sister on the phone and told her she would be home the next day. She was in joyous anticipation before meeting her baby girl and was anxious to get home soon. Shortly after Isabella called her sister, Louis asked her to take charge of the ship. The pair took turns steering the catamaran through the night, and on this night it was Isabella's turn. It was the final leg of the trip that the girl was so excited about, but unfortunately the catamaran and Isabella never made it home. During the night, Louis was awakened by a loud noise while the vessel was on the high seas. He boarded the boat and noticed that the sails and rigging were loose and no one was at the helm. And his wife was nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that the catamaran was about to go down, so Louis quickly packed his suitcase and carried it over. Took 2 gym bags, some emergency flares, a radio transmitter, and food to the lifeboat. At 1 a.m., Louis made a distress call from a life raft. In desperation, he contacted the U.S. Coast Guard and told them he was 26 nautical miles west of Cable Beach, Bahamas, offshore, in international waters. He was alone. His ship was sinking. There had been some kind of collision, and worst of all, he had never been able to find his wife. Around 4 a.m., a Coast Guard helicopter crew finally located the life raft. Louis was unharmed but very worried about his missing wife. Rescuers were able to retrieve his backpack, which was unusually heavy due to the 225 silver coins he grabbed before disembarking from the catamaran. The catamaran was found at dawn. During the night it had managed to capsize, but never went underwater. Louis was eventually transported to the southernmost city in Florida. During questioning, Louis told police officers that he and Isabella took turns driving the boat, and at the time of the accident it was her turn. Louis was asleep in the cabin at the time and awoke to the sensation that the catamaran had collided with something. When he went on deck and did not find his wife, he began calling her name, but received no response. He was worried that some of the rigging had come loose and could push her into the water. He was an experienced sailor and knew that this was very possible and potentially deadly. On the same day, May 15th, Isabella Hellman was officially reported missing. A search and rescue operation from water and air was carried out, but after 4 days of fruitless searching, the rescue operation was called off. There was nothing more they could do. Less than 24 hours after the search for Isabella ended, Lewis requested official confirmation from the Coast Guard that his wife was dead. Isabella was his wife and the mother of his child. He had seen her less than 5 days ago, and yet he had so quickly lost hope. Authorities attributed the man's strange behavior to his overwhelming grief, but it still seemed rather odd to them. Lewis' request was denied simply because the Coast Guard was not authorized to issue such documents. On May 24th, Lewis told a television station that he planned to return to Cuba and continue his search for his wife on a rented boat. It seems he hadn't given up hope of finding her after all. 3 days later, he met Isabella's sister and told her that he had just returned from Cuba. He told her that he had met with the Cuban authorities and checked all the hospitals, but that he had not been able to find Isabella. He added that it had been 2 weeks since she had disappeared and that he had given up hope of ever seeing her alive again. On May 28th, Lewis went to the house where his wife's family lived to pick up their daughter, but they were reluctant to do so. An argument broke out, and during the disagreement, Isabella's sister repeatedly stated that Lewis was responsible for Isabella's death and even said that he wanted to kill her mother. The conflict was resolved only with the help of the police, and they returned the daughter to Lewis, but they also found the man's behavior strange. Not only that he had quarreled over his daughter and remained calm, but his calmness after Isabella's disappearance was suspicious. On May 30th, Bennett was summoned for questioning by police, during which he denied all allegations of involvement in his wife's disappearance. According to him, he had planned to live with Isabella for the rest of his life and they were truly happy together, but now he and his daughter would have to live without Isabella. The police were skeptical of this statement, because while Lewis assured everyone of their happy life, the loved ones of the missing woman told a different story. Her family said that the couple began to quarrel often after the birth of the child, and neighbors of the couple confirmed it. One of the main reasons for the quarrels was that Lewis insisted on moving their family to Australia, while Isabella refused to leave the US. Apparently, their honeymoon was supposed to help the couple mend their relationship and resolve the dispute. While the Isabella missing person case was being investigated, police turned their attention to investigating Lewis in a seemingly unrelated case. The fact is that a year earlier Bennett had served as first mate on a yacht whose captain once stashed 617 collectible silver and gold coins worth about $100,000. Once, while the yacht was docked in the Caribbean, with no crew on board, someone broke in and stole just those very coins. At the time of Isabella's disappearance, the case would have been closed, but when one of the rescuers remembered that coins had been found in Lewis' backpack, they decided to investigate further. A year later, these coins were identified by the captain of the boat. He said it was part of his collection that had been previously stolen. Because of this information, police were able to obtain a search warrant for Lewis' home. On June 16, 2017, a search of the apartment uncovered 162 gold coins hidden in a closet, but by then Lewis had already left U.S. soil. He moved with his daughter to England where his parents lived. Because of this, authorities were unable to arrest him until he returned to U.S. soil. Lewis' financial situation was not the best, and this forced him to return to the United States, where he needed to sell his apartment and get insurance payments for the sunken catamaran. August 28, 2017. Lewis Bennett was arrested in Florida. He was charged with theft but insisted he was innocent. A couple days later, a federal judge set Bennett's bail at $250,000, but he was unable to post such a huge sum, so he had to remain in custody while awaiting trial. While he waited, Lewis tried to get Isabella officially declared dead. This would have allowed him to sell their joint property and access the funds in her bank accounts. But the judge twice refused to allow him to do so because the investigation into her disappearance is still ongoing. In November 2017, Bennett pleaded guilty to both stealing the coins and knowingly transporting the coins into the United States. Bennett's parents appealed to the judge who presided over the case for leniency in sentencing, reasoning that his young daughter had already lost her mother. February 20, 2018, Bennett was sentenced to 7 months in prison followed by 3 years probation. 2 years after Isabella Hellman disappeared, she was officially declared dead. In a series of rulings, the district judge wrote that Hellman was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017, where he also stated that no communication had been received from Isabella during that period, clearly indicating her death. On the same day that the verdict in the stolen coin case was announced, Bennett was charged with murder. The police were still determined to find out what had happened to Isabella. Their theory was that he had intentionally wrecked the catamaran he and Isabella were traveling on. Investigators claimed the motive was to get his wife's property and pay off his debts so he could leave with his daughter for Australia. It was also found that a few months before her death, Isabella admitted in text messages that she was afraid of her husband. She felt that he no longer respected her and also stated that she was afraid to go home. An examination of the catamaran revealed that the portholes at the bottom of the waterline were open before it sank, and that the damage to the two hulls appeared to have been done from the inside. After examining photographs and video footage taken by the U.S. Coast Guard, an expert hired by the FBI to help investigate the crime determined that Bennett's original story could not in fact be true. An assistant professor of naval architecture and oceanology at the U.S. Coast Guard said the damage indicates that they were caused intentionally and not from an accident. The salvage team that found the sunken catamaran also found nothing it could have collided with. Divers inspecting the vessel were hesitant to go inside because it could collapse at any moment, and it did. The catamaran sank to a depth of more than 4 feet and no detailed inspection could be made. In November 2019, as a result of a plea bargain, Bennett was charged with manslaughter. So the second-degree murder charge was dropped, sparing Lewis a life sentence. Because of the deal, he faces a maximum of 8 years in prison. In a document signed by Bennett and filed by the prosecutor, the court said he did not remember whether he was looking for his wife or calling her when he discovered she was missing. He did not set off flares or search for his wife on the catamaran or in the water, which meant Bennett did not immediately call for help. Instead, he loaded his belongings and some valuables including coins onto a lifeboat. He then tried to stage a collision that caused the catamaran to sink, after which he left the vessel without his wife. Prosecutors said he did call for help, but it was 45 minutes after he stopped and realized his wife was nowhere to be found. It was known that Bennett had experienced sailing on open water for an extended period of time, which included emergency training. He clearly knew what to do in an accident, but for some reason did not put his knowledge to use that night. Was it a conscious choice on his part, or did he just panic? He should have made sure that when the vessel was being steered by Isabella she was wearing a life jacket, a seatbelt, or had a personal locator with her. The prosecution pointed this out, as well as the fact that Isabella did not have the proper experience and training that Lewis had. In essence, Bennett confessed to his negligence, which led to Isabella falling overboard and drowning. Only Bennett really knows what happened that night aboard the catamaran, and he is unlikely to ever talk about it. On May 28, 2019, 42-year-old Louis Bennett pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of his wife Isabella Hellman. As part of the plea bargain, he waived his right to appeal. Before the judge ruled, Bennett asked to be allowed to get out on parole so he could continue to raise his daughter. He said he would make every effort to keep his daughter's memory of Isabella alive. But the judge sided with the prosecution and sentenced Louis to 8 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. An attorney for the Hellman family said Amelia lost her mom, but that doesn't mean she lost her mom's family.